Everyone involved walked into the studio expecting a familiar kind of royal-adjacent sit-down. Sleek public broadcaster set, composed interviewer, high-profile guest in a crisp white blouse. Everything pre-agreed and polished. Instead, as the opening ident faded and the red ticker ran across the bottom of the screen, it took under 5 minutes for viewers to sense that something was off. In this imagined scenario, Meghan Markle wasn't just guarded, she was openly confrontational. And Laura Kuenssberg, the United Kingdom's famously steady political interviewer, was about to learn what happens when a guest treats a serious current affairs slot like a personal battlefield. Before the hour was done, one of them would stay firmly in her chair, and the other would bring the whole conversation to a halt. The set had been built to project calm neutrality, almost courtesy. Floor-to-ceiling LED walls showed a stylized image of Downing Street, the black front door, pale stone facade, and dark railings rendered in cool tones. At the center, 2 scarlet armchairs faced each other across a low, pale wood table. 2 glasses of water were placed with mathematical precision on coasters, like stage props in a minimalist play. Overhead, blue-white studio lighting washed the space in a clean, institutional glow that suggested order and control. Laura Kuenssberg sat in one of the red chairs, back straight yet unforced, a small stack of question cards balanced lightly on one knee. Her dress echoed the color of the chair, the bold red standing out against the understated digital backdrop. Her face was composed, her expression the familiar mix of curiosity and steel that had seen her through interviews with prime ministers, cabinet ministers, and party leaders without a tremor in her voice. Opposite her, Meghan Markle was already settled by the time the floor manager's countdown hit 3. White shirt tucked neatly into black tailored trousers, ankles crossed, posture immaculate, hands loosely interlaced in her lap, but her jaw was tight and there was an edge in her gaze. Her hair was pulled back into a low, severe knot, emphasizing the angles of her face and the tension resting there. Studio live in 3, 2. The floor manager's murmur faded as the red light above the main camera snapped on. "Good evening," Laura began, her tone even, the cadence instantly recognizable to millions. "You're watching BBC News. Tonight, we're joined by a woman who has found herself at the center of royal, political, and cultural debates in both Britain and the United States. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, thank you for being with us." Meghan inclined a head a fraction. "I'm here, though I do hope this isn't yet another attempt to turn my life into a spectacle." The static in the room lifted by a notch. "This is a current affairs interview, not a drama," Laura answered with a polite half-smile. "Let me begin with something broad. You've been living in the US for some time now. When you think back on your years in the UK, the monarchy, the public role, everything that unfolded, how do you see that period?" Meghan gave a short, mirthless chuckle. "How do I see it? As a chapter I outgrew. That seems to be a concept some people here find difficult. They cling to this fantasy that I should be endlessly grateful for standing near a famous balcony." The viewers at home were silent, but in the control room, shoulders tensed, eyes flicked to each other. On set, Laura's expression did not change. "Some would say," Laura continued, "that it was more than simply being nearby. You married into an institution intertwined with the state. You gained a substantial platform from that role. Do you feel any sense of responsibility for the upheaval that came after?" Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What I find revealing is that when people talk about upheaval, they point their fingers at me, not at the institution that left me exposed. No one ever asks whether it accepts any responsibility." "I've put those questions to them as well," Laura replied evenly. "Tonight I'm putting them to you."
And I am telling you that my duty is to safeguard my well-being and my family, not to protect a structure more worried about press coverage than about whether I was falling apart. Laura glanced briefly at her cards before looking back up. You mentioned your family, she said. There have been reports suggesting your relationship with Prince Harry has come under strain, pressures around media work, business arrangements, and… Meghan cut across her with a small, decisive flick of her hand. You mean rumors, she said. Let's call it what it is. British outlets love to dress up their fixation as concern or reports. It's gossip, and I'm frankly disappointed to hear it echoed on the BBC. Her voice remained moderate in volume, but the blade beneath it was clear. I'm raising it, Laura said, keeping her tone steady, because you've chosen to share parts of your marriage publicly, in high-profile interviews, streaming series, a book, podcasts. When you invite the world into your story, people are going to ask follow-up questions. That's part of public accountability. Meghan smiled, but the warmth stopped well short of her eyes. Accountability is an interesting term to hear from British media, especially considering this country's record with women who don't fit the roles scripted for them. Is that how you see yourself? Laura asked carefully. As someone this country failed? I see myself, Meghan answered coolly, as a person who came through a system that wanted a wordless, smiling emblem. The moment I refused to perform that role, I was labeled difficult, demanding, divisive. It's hardly a new pattern. Laura inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the argument without endorsing it. Let's turn to your life in the US, she said. You've described it as liberating, yet critics say you've swapped one powerful structure for another. Hollywood, streaming giants, major media contracts. Do you feel you've simply moved from one set of power dynamics to another? Meghan's shoulders lifted in the faintest shrug. That sounds like something you'd hear on a policy panel, she replied. People living real lives understand this. When you felt caged, finding ways to actually use your voice isn't hypocrisy, it's survival. If I partner with organizations that can amplify what I care about, that's called strategy, not betrayal. Laura's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. Some observers argue that your message often circles back to your own experiences, your suffering, your resilience. Do you worry that the causes you champion, mental health, equality, women's rights, risk being overshadowed by the focus on you? Meghan's jaw flexed. It's remarkable, she said, her tone growing cooler, how quickly women are chastised for speaking from their own lives. When men publish memoirs or detail their struggles, they're praised as courageous. When I do it, suddenly I'm self-centered. I've stopped absorbing that double standard. I'm not asking you to internalize anything, Laura replied quietly. I'm asking whether you recognize that some viewers may feel worn out hearing a similar narrative retold across multiple formats. And I'm saying that if people are exhausted by hearing uncomfortable truths, that reflects on them, not on me. For a few seconds, silence sat between them across the floorless wooden table. The water glasses remained untouched. The quiet hum of the studio lights seemed louder than before. Laura shifted her stack of cards to one side, not looking down this time. Let's be specific, she said, leaning a fraction closer. Questions have been raised about differences between various accounts you've given, details of conversations, sequences of events, timelines. Some people say the story appears to evolve. Do you understand why that prompts scrutiny? Meghan's lips parted, her disbelief unmistakable. Are you accusing me of inventing things on live television? She asked, her voice low and edged. I'm saying, Laura answered calmly, that when the public is asked to accept your account as part of the context for significant decisions, your departure from royal duties, shifting perceptions of the monarchy, international discussion, it's reasonable for journalists to ask about consistency. Meghan let out a short, airy laugh. Consistency, she repeated. Trauma isn't a neatly edited documentary, Laura. It doesn't arrive with timestamps and footnotes. When you're trying to survive, you're not cataloguing every moment for later cross-examination. Yet somehow I'm expected to function like a digital archive with flawless recall so you can tick boxes. It's not my personal checklist, Laura replied quietly. It's about whether the public can ask questions when someone uses their own hardship as a central narrative. Meghan's eyes flashed. You mean when a woman refuses to sit down, smile nicely, and play the eternal grateful Duchess? Let's at least be honest about what unsettles people. In the gallery, a producer's voice sounded softly in Laura's earpiece, urging her to move on, keep the rhythm. She ignored the prompt. "All right," she said, leaning a fraction closer. "Let's step away for a moment from the institution, from the press, from Britain. Let's talk about you."
Publicly stops contributing to healing and instead keeps the conflict alive. Meghan let out a short, dismissive laugh. That sounds like something said by people who've never had to fight to correct their own story, she replied. You use that word often, fight, Laura observed, against the palace, against the press, against Britain, against detractors. Do you ever worry that you're now in a constant battle with almost the entire world? For a heartbeat, Meghan hesitated. Then the familiar composure slid back into place. What I worry about, she said coolly, is raising children in a world where powerful structures go unchallenged. If that means I'm in a perpetual fight, then yes, I'll keep fighting. Even if that struggle leaves damaged relationships behind, Laura asked quietly. If it burns bridges rather than builds them. Meghan's eyes sharpened. Real change isn't tidy, she replied. Sometimes things break. Laura leaned forward slightly. What about what's broken for Prince Harry? She asked. His bonds with his father, his brother, his country. Do you ever think about the cost to him? Meghan's shoulders tightened. Harry is a grown man, she said. He chooses for himself. Of course, Laura said. But he has also acknowledged that he now has limited contact with most of his previous family circle. Do you take any responsibility for where things stand? Meghan's smile looked strained. That's an offensive framing, she replied. It's a direct one, Laura said immediately. When two people build a life together, the consequences of their choices are shared. People watching want to know whether you recognize any personal part in that outcome. Meghan's voice dropped a register. Let me be absolutely clear, she said. I didn't cut Harry off from his family. The institution's dynamics did that long before I arrived. I simply refused to be the acceptable casualty of their unresolved issues. And yet, Laura said evenly, he left with you. Yes, Meghan shot back, because he chose what he saw as freedom. Some here describe it as exile, Laura said quietly. The word hung between them like a sudden draft of cold air. Meghan's eyes flared. You're twisting language to fit a narrative that plays, she said. I'm reflecting how many in this country perceive it, including people who once admired you. Meghan shook her head slowly, her expression hardening into open disdain. I understand now, she said. This isn't an interview. You're conducting a prosecution. No, Laura replied, voice calm but implacable. I'm asking you difficult questions. That is my role. And I am under no obligation to sit here absorbing hostile spin dressed up as fairness, Meghan snapped. Laura didn't look away. You're right, she said, quietly. You're not obliged to, but you did agree to this conversation. For a long moment, Meghan said nothing, her breathing visible, the strain unmistakable even through the lens. Laura glanced briefly at her cards once more, then set them face down on her knee. Let's move to one final topic for this part of the program, your future. You've spoken about building a new legacy beyond royal life. In 20 years' time, What do you want people to remember you for? Meghan straightened in her chair, some of the polished media poise returning. For choosing my own path, for protecting my children, for using my voice when staying quiet would have been more comfortable for other people. And if, in 2 decades, the overriding memory is conflict, not courage, Meghan's mouth curved into a controlled, practiced smile, then that will reveal more about the world's priorities than about mine. I'll hold her gaze for a beat. We'll resume after the break, she said. As the cameras cut away once more, the studio seemed colder. Meghan leaned back, arms locked across her chest. Laura inhaled slowly, listening to the flurry of urgent whispers now filling her earpiece. In the control room, one producer said, "She's not giving an inch." Another answered, "Neither is Laura." And for the first time that evening, it was obvious to everyone. This was no longer about information, it was about who would reach their limit first. The red light came back on. No music this time, no gentle reset, just an immediate return to pressure. Laura Kuenssberg sat upright, her note cards untouched by her hands now. Whatever patience she'd brought into the studio had been replaced not by anger, but with something frostier, resolve. "Welcome back," she said. "This is our final segment." Meghan dipped her chin once, arms still folded tightly across her torso like armor. Laura did not circle the topic. "I want to address finances," she said. "You and Prince Harry have signed high-value media agreements, while often saying your focus is healing, privacy, and protection. Many people struggle to reconcile those aims with the scale and repetition of the deals. Do you?" Meghan let out a sharp breath. "Of course we were going to get here." "Yes," Laura replied, "we are here." "People are always more comfortable when women tell their stories for nothing," Meghan answered coolly. "If I speak out without compensation, I'm taken advantage of. If I'm paid, I'm labeled greedy. It's a neat trap." "It's not simply about payment," Laura said, her tone level. "It's the frequency. Each project revisits the same grievances while also claiming that you're moving on. Which is it?" Meghan leaned forward. "Do you want a quotable line?" she asked. "Here it is. Trauma doesn't vanish on a timeline that suits the public. And credibility, does that run out at some point?" Meghan's jaw set. "You keep circling the idea that I'm somehow misleading people," she said. "If you have an allegation, say it plainly." "All right," Laura replied. "Several statements made in your various public appearances have been questioned by commentators, pointing to documents, other witnesses, or your previous interviews. Do you accept that some elements of your story may appear inconsistent to the public?" Meghan gave a sharp, shot laugh. "What you call inconsistency often comes from selective reporting, or from the natural conflict between lived memory and how events are recorded on paper." Laura responded without missing a beat. "And part of this is that complex stories don't always fit neatly into headlines. I accept that, but when people feel those gaps, they raise questions. That's what we're doing here." A thick silence settled over the set. "This isn't journalism," Meghan said finally, her eyes hardening. "You're dismantling a person's character under the guise of politeness." "No," Laura replied, her voice calm but implacable. "I'm asking you difficult questions. That is my role. And I am under no obligation to sit here absorbing hostile spin dressed up as fairness," Meghan snapped. Laura didn't look away. "You're right," she said, quietly. "You're not obliged to, but you did agree to this conversation." For a long moment, Meghan said nothing, her breathing visible, the strain unmistakable even through the lens. Laura glanced briefly at her cards once more, then set them face down on her knee. "Let's move to one final topic for this part of the program, your future. You've spoken about building a new legacy beyond royal life. In 20 years' time, What do you want people to remember you for? Meghan straightened in her chair, some of the polished media poise returning. For choosing my own path, for protecting my children, for using my voice when staying quiet would have been more comfortable for other people. And if in 2 decades the overriding memory is conflict, not carriage, Meghan's mouth curved into a controlled, practiced smile, then that will reveal more about the world's priorities than about mine. I'll hold her gaze for a beat. We'll resume after the break, she said. As the cameras cut away once more, the studio seemed colder. Meghan leaned back, arms locked across her chest. Laura inhaled slowly, listening to the flurry of urgent whispers now filling her earpiece. In the control room, one producer said, "She's not giving an inch." Another answered, "Neither is Laura." And for the first time that evening, it was obvious to everyone. This was no longer about information, it was about who would reach their limit first. The red light came back on. No music this time, no gentle reset, just an immediate return to pressure. Laura Kuenssberg sat upright, her note cards untouched by her hands now. Whatever patience she'd brought into the studio had been replaced not by anger, but with something frostier, resolve. "Welcome back," she said. "This is our final segment." Meghan dipped her chin once, arms still folded tightly across her torso like armor. Laura did not circle the topic. "I want to address finances," she said. "You and Prince Harry have signed high-value media agreements, while often saying your focus is healing, privacy, and protection. Many people struggle to reconcile those aims with the